get student course test in the attending DAO test class. And what this is doing is it's essentially testing two lists against each other, and I'm going to go over how to do that. Okay, so let's see. The first thing here is we've already prepared the sample data, and that was the previous video. So now we must use this data, and the first thing we do is we create a new data access object. This allows us to access our database. We then get the results from the method we're supposed to be testing. This 41, I know I'm supposed to put in a 41, because if I get my what class, so get student course, if I go to get student course, the attending ID is 23 through 24. And if I open up MySQL, go into the JUnit, and attending, '23 through 26 is student ID 41. The student ID is 41 for all of these attendings. So that means in my test, to get the correct data, I must pass in 41. I then create a Boolean called found equals false. And this Boolean will tell me if I have found what I'm looking for or not. I'm aware I misspelled it. I will fix that in a second. Hopefully. Okay. The next two things here is basically asserting that neither of my lists are null. I want to make sure that my lists have been populated. If at any point in time my lists are not populated here, then I'm running into issues and I need to basically fix those issues before my test can actually run. All right. I then have 4 attending sample attending list. Basically what this is doing is it's creating a new attending object for every item in my list. And then it's going to do whatever's inside my curly brackets for every single one of those items. I do the same thing using my result list. And I do what's inside on every single one of those. So if I open up a little bit more of a visual of what's going on here, I have, oops, a horrible picture, but a picture nonetheless. This is my sample data. Okay. I then have a temporary storage called sample, and then in green I have my result. Once again, it's terrible drawing, but that's okay. And then I have a temporary result. Okay. So what's going to happen is I have a value in sample 1, sample index 1. That gets put into my storage value. And then I go and I put what's the first index in my result list into its temporary storage. I then run a compare. I get my results, and then I move on. I compare, and then I move on. I compare, I move on, I move on, I move on, all the ways down until I get to my last item. And then what happens? Oops. I put the 2 in. And I start back at A. I compare again. I take the B again, the C again, all the way down the list, comparing every single time I go. And once I'm done, I move on to the 3. And all the way down, I repeat this process over and over and over again until I've run through my entire sample. So for every one of my sample items, I will iterate through the entire result list, comparing my sample index with every index in the result. And that's what these 2 lines of code are doing. Okay. So what I have here is an if statement. If sample.getAttending ID equals actual attending.getID. So what I'm going to talk about is just that. What this line is doing is, since I'm checking my sample item with every item in result, I need to make sure that we only run the comparison if they're matching attendings. We don't want attending ID 30 being asserted that they're the same if the attending ID is actually 20 on the second item. The reason we don't want this is they're not the same, and they're never going to be the same if the IDs aren't matching. We can't compare on a one-to-one basis because we don't know the order that our sample data has been given to us, and we don't know the order that the result's been given back to us. Another thing is our sample data may not be the full data set, so I cannot just compare on a one-to-one basis. I should only compare and assert that everything is the same if my IDs are the same. I'm using IDs because they're unique, and I should never have a repeated attending ID. Now, as you saw, I deleted something, and this is going into the extraneous case. Sample.getEmail.equals actual.getEmail. And what this is doing is, in the case where you have multiple instructors for the same class, as we do with QEO2, the attending is from the student's perspective. The student can only attend one class, or the student can only attend the class one time, so there should never be any repeats. But with how we've done a join, what we're going to end up with is multiple records with the same attending ID, but different instructor emails. So, like I was saying when I had just this first bit here, we need to make sure we're only comparing the same object with itself. If we know they're already not going to be the same, because even though they have the same attending ID, but they have different instructors, they're not going to be the same, and we know that, so there's no point in asserting that they're not going to be the same.